So I think that's an important thing for people to know, that we're going to be covering, all these different kind of things, and use it as a launching pad to explore great music in all genres, and also to get into some of the details about the different instruments. And we'll be doing a little theory and a little bit about the techniques of how does Tony Rice do what he does on that guitar? How does he get the power to do those pull-offs and the hammer-ons and, some of these techniques on the guitar that help create his style? Or how do these different piano players tackle that instrument and create a voice through their touch, through their dynamics, through their harmonic concepts, and that sort of thing. So, the definition of virtuosity in Merriam-Webster dictionary is great technical skill is in the practice of a fine art. But when I did a little bit of reading about the history, it was really first kind of devoted toward the concept of music, and then we began to expand into, now you hear that, oh, this guy is a virtuoso computer programmer,
Yeah.
But it was originally, and it was also originally kind of devoted more towards composing and maestros and things, and not so much about someone's just technical ability to play an instrument. So the origins of the word do have a kind of broad conceptual meaning too,
I think it was sort of the composers were eager to compose music that was different and more challenging, and so to advance the music, and they're going to compose that for a specific performer who can actualize it. So Paganini who was probably the original virtuoso that inspired later generations of virtuosity, like Franz Liszt, the other virtuoso that seems to be at the forefront of the word and the beginning of the movement of playing technically on the level that's beyond anybody else's skill, that you're sort of one of a kind in the world. And right. Paganini had to start writing his own music for himself because nobody could write music as flashy and complex as he was capable of playing on the violin. It was a brand new phenomena, like a lightning bolt.
Right. And I think when we did the episode with Todd Phillips, and we're talking about guitar, I had this kind of epiphany that the development of bluegrass guitar as a virtuoso instrument was just recently. It came with Doc Watson around 1960. And so you have classical violin going back centuries, and then other new forms of virtuosity developing as different music forms develop as well.
Sure. Yeah, I mean, tenor saxophone didn't start really till the mid-30s.
Right.
Relatively late.
So, we'll be looking at what does it take to become a virtuoso? Is it the 10,000 hours of practice?
That's the cliche.
Yeah. Is it practicing with intention? Do you have to have perfect pitch, or does absolute pitch, help?
No. I mean, I like to think you don't. There's a few musicians in the great canon who didn't have absolute pitch. We can get into that.
Yeah, but so we'll be talking about the tools, I guess, that make a virtuoso, from practice to the conceptual development of the genres they're in.
And it being music, everything is so subjective. There's no real objective criteria for anything. You either like it or you don't, or you say this guy's great and this guy sucks. Everybody does that all the time, even if people's contributions are worthy on their own merits. People have such kind of strange, pet opinions about everything.
Yeah, well, that's part of the fun.
Yeah.
Right? I mean,
we're just going to smash right through all that. Enjoy everything. Right.
And that's ultimately what we're going to be doing the shows. We're going to be laying out our opinions about this different music.
Right, the virtuosity of Barbra Streisand. Yes.
Well, back to the opera episode, when we were first kind of coming up with all of our show ideas, and God, we quickly had 100 shows before we knew it. One that came up was, how do you define and analyze singers? Because people's idea of a great singer could be Joe Cocker or Pavarotti, right?
Sure, and, I like both. Yeah.
Yeah, and so, but we were thinking, opera. That's an area where there's been a serious history of trying to define the vocal virtuoso.
Yeah,
And
and it being singing, I think everybody relates to the singer. You can't really always really relate to the oboe player with their bullfrog face. It's like it's not visually pleasing. But the singer, I can get with that. It's almost like an actor. Everybody can relate to acting and storytelling and singing.
right, and yeah, so and then we also kind of realized that neither of us knew much about opera, and
I got a
so
lot out of that show. I got to tell you, man. I came out on the back end of it really appreciating what those people do.
yeah, and I think that was a surprising and exciting episode. So
Yeah.
people have a lot of, like you said, biases of, oh, I hate that, music or whatever. But I happen to have a good friend who was a director at the Metropolitan Opera, so we could call on an expert, and he took us through the whole history and through the 10 greatest singers that you have to know if you're going to get into opera. So that was really fun.
Yeah.
And I'm hoping we'll have more shows like that too, where we get schooled and the things
Yeah.
we don't know.
Lots of room for that.
Yeah. So be sure to check us out. We're going to be doing a show every 2 weeks, 20, 24, 25 shows a year. And we're also going to be doing some fun conceptual shows where we got a fun show called Singers Who Sizzle, or Singers Who Shred, and where we take a lot of popular performers, people like Prince or John Mayer or Nat King Cole, and actually it's going to be 2 shows, right? It's going to be Singers Who Shred and then Singers Who Swing. And,
Swing, right.
So we ended up with so many great examples. We broke it into 2 shows, with one focused on kind of rock, pop, and country, and another on kind of soul, blues, and jazz, and so and then we'll be just mixing and matching in cool ways to explore all sorts of different music. So we hope everybody tunes in, and
then there's also the in-depth shows like Miles and Coltrane and Bird, and where we can go much further into the granular details and the actual talking about the music and the harmony and the playing and the making the connections with everything. That's what really appeals to me, is going in further, specifically into the specifics of music, and then also making the broader connections and see how everything connects together. That's my big exciting thing about this thing.
Yeah, and I think that the podcast gives us that flexibility. When we did the
Yeah.
show with Todd Phillips, it was great, and so we just said, well, this is 2 shows. We'll keep going. We're not going to try to limit what we're talking about or whatever, and as long as the material is interesting and engaging and entertaining, it gives us that flexibility. We don't have to do it in 5 minutes or in 50 minutes. We can really gauge what level it needs to go, and we just go there. So that's really fun, and like you said, going in deep. I think it's trying to find that balance between what the deep harmonic analysis, for example, of a certain thing, but also making it accessible to people. So that's my role, Mr. Joe Q. Public, who will occasionally
Right.
stop you and ask you to explain
Yes.
the concept, so
Perfect.
that our audience can kind of get a sense of how some of this stuff works. It's not going to be music lessons. That's going to be over at the Patreon page. But but I think people get a lot out of it.
But I think with a little step by step, people will find that it's not as impenetrable as you've been led to believe.
Yeah. Yeah. And also the different instruments. We could talk briefly about that. I mean, everything from the banjo to obscure instruments in orchestras. I mean, there's so much.
Virtuoso accordion, virtuoso harmonica.
Yeah. I mean, that's going to be fun too, to kind of seek out, who are the masters of this particular instrument. And of course, that if you get to the guitar, well, now we have to break it into many genres and many eras, just like we do with piano.
And traveling around the world, right? Africa, India.
Yes, and then also getting into the masters of different types of music all over the world. So
Jamaica.
we've got a lot of material to get to.
I can't wait. Yeah.
And again, check out the Patreon page. If you don't have a Spotify subscription, you might consider it. They have an incredible library, and there's a lot of other great podcasts as well.
And when we have the deeper shows, that's when we have the transcriptions available.
That's right. Yeah. And then also, for example, with our Coltrane audio biography, as I'm calling it, there will be certain episodes that will be for free, but then to get the full 8 episodes, you might have to get a subscription. A lot of work and time goes into preparing the stuff, and so we'd like to at least keep our heads above water here while we spend way too many hours working on the show.
Already did that, yeah.
Yeah. So, but that's going to be really, I think, a unique thing. And like Coltrane, I think we were just talking about recently, there's a great documentary called Chasing the Train, but it's an hour and 40 minutes long. It doesn't have the time to get into the deeper stuff. So hopefully that's something that, if people see that documentary and they want to learn more about John Coltrane, they can come to our series and get a little deeper into the music and the man,
Yeah.
All right, Timo.
Nice.
I will see you in 2 weeks when we have our first episode, 1950s Jazz Piano. Give us just a quick preview of what we're going to hear there.
Well, it's got to start with Monk, right? If it's 50s jazz piano. He's the sort of grand saint of the whole thing. And then it bifurcates from there with Bud Powell and Red Garland, and we'll go down a subjective list of 50s jazz piano. Hopefully we'll be able to do 2 or 3 episodes on that, since it's such a massive topic and we don't want to overlook anybody because there were so many great musicians contributing overall. But of course we'll have to focus the drill a little bit on the top 10 or 12 for the first episode, and hopefully we can do a runner-up thing, not to quantify people too much because they're all really great. And to be able to play piano like that in the 50s, bebop and stuff, every single one of them is a virtuoso, period.
Yeah, that's great. And then our episode after that is going to be modern bluegrass guitar. And one of the things we're doing quickly to tell people is we're not doing things chronologically. We're jumping right into different eras, different things that have sparked our interest, but we will be going back and doing the beginnings of bluegrass guitar and the founding fathers and one mother, as we call that episode, the mother being Mother Maybelle Carter. But we will be covering the whole histories of these different genres and instruments over time. And then if you're interested in a certain thing, you can just pick out the episodes you want to check out and listen to those and ignore the rest. So it's totally up to the listener how much they want to get into it.
I like making the connections between all of it. That's what really excites me about it.
Well, with our first episodes, that has really been a big thing, hasn't it? Where we start talking about something about like bluegrass guitar, and suddenly we find ourselves, connecting to all sorts of jazz influences. And
right.
Todd Phillips talking about how that's all they were listening to was jazz when they were forming the David Grisman Quintet.
Well, it turns out the musicians are omnivorous. It's just like it's sort of more like the record companies and how to sell it, the genrefying it. It actually, the music all goes together. You can listen to Maybelle Carter and Coltrane in the same breath, and it's actually not that different as much as you think, right?
Yeah, and I think that's maybe kind of one of the ultimate underlying themes of the show. Is that?
Yeah, totally.
And that's why we want to cover it all, and we want people to listen to all of it because it all connects, and you can find some really interesting connections to the music you think you like, or maybe the music you don't think you like, and can discover some new things and connections that you didn't realize existed. Yeah, so that's very cool. All right, well, we'll sign off until 2 weeks from now,
and
I'll see you then.
All right, bye-bye.